close look at it.
The evidence we've discovered shows that a private company has struggled to keep on top of key information, meaning they've not been monitoring some offenders properly. Those within the service who've spoken out tonight say that the breaking up of the community payback scheme in London has had real consequences for the delivery of justice. This comes as questions are already being asked about the government's wider plans for the privatisation of the probation service.
Well, we contacted Serco and they gave us this response. We reject any suggestion that the service is in disarray or that public staff and offender safety has been compromised in the delivery of this contract. Serco has managed community payback in partnership with London Probation Trust since the 31st of October 2012. Together, we manage around 1,000 new offenders every month, and each one is thoroughly risk assessed before being allocated an appropriate place on one of the many projects we have running across London. We're confident that the innovative changes we've introduced in London are increasing operational efficiencies and ultimately saving the taxpayer money. So far, Community Payback has provided London with over 1 million hours of offender labour, and our performance on key measures, including successful completion and starts within 7 days, is above the national average for probation trusts. We're not complacent, and whilst we're very close to fully meeting all our targets, we recognise that improvements are needed in some areas, such as stand-downs and offender attendance. We've been working with both the Ministry of Justice and LPT to address this, and are confident that the steps we're taking will deliver the necessary improvements. In common with probation trusts across the country, Serco faced challenges implementing the new national DLIUS IT system, and we worked hard to quickly resolve these issues. So what are the implications for the government's plans to hand control of probation services to more private firms and charities across the country? Joining me, Sue Hall, Chair of the Probation Chiefs Association, and Max Chambers from the Policy Exchange think tank. Welcome both of you. Sue Hall, do you think there is a problem?
Well, clearly the allegations that we've heard here today are very concerning. We're talking about the basics of running a competent community payback scheme.
So it could be teething problems then?
Well, we're talking about a contract that's 15 months in and a contract that was inherited from London Probation Trust as a going concern. Community Payback in London is one of 35 community payback schemes, and the government's plans will see next year not just 34 other community payback schemes put out to competition, but actually a much wider array of work with offenders, probably about 70% of the caseload that probation currently manages. To move into that order of competition on the basis of very little experience, very little evidence of the private sector being able to manage probation work competently in the community feels rash.
Do you think there's a problem, Max?
Well, I'm not quite sure, having just seen the video, how much that shows us about the wider implications. Doesn't look like public safety was put at risk at all in the video. And what we can be sure of is that, as far as I'm aware, London Probation Trust and the Ministry of Justice are pretty happy with the contract that's being run.
If supervision is deteriorating of those offenders doing the community payback, then potentially those offenders could be reoffending, but no one would know.
Well, I think people would know. I mean, reoffending rates are published and are very transparently published by the Ministry of Justice.
No, but the supervisors, Serco, wouldn't know. Then the supervision is deteriorating.
Well, I don't think there was evidence there that supervision is deteriorating, and as far as I'm aware, Serco are meeting and exceeding their performance targets. I think it's just quite difficult to draw wider implications about whether the government's reforms, which are about reducing reoffending, not just about community payback, I think it's quite hard to draw those links on the basis of an investigation that was whistleblowers rather than the people who are actually managing the service. The head of London Probation Trust hasn't given you an interview, and I'm not sure whether she's happy with the service. My understanding is that MOJ and London Probation Trust are very happy with the contract as it's being run. And let's remember, it's delivering a substantial efficiency of 37%, as well as maintaining a good standard of service.
If we talk about reducing reoffending, the position at the moment is that caseloads actually supervised by the probation service have a good track record of reducing reoffending. We've seen rates steadily come down over the last 10 years. So the rationale for privatising the probation service isn't because probation is a failing service. There is a group of offenders within the system, the short-term prisoners, that currently are not supervised. And it seems to me that the government's made a leap from needing to provide services for that group to dismantling the probation service in order to provide the funding to do so. Now that's a really huge leap. It's like betting the farm on a throw of a procurement dice that by doing this massive outsourcing you'll provide better results. I just don't think there's the evidence around at the moment to give us confidence that that'll be so.
Well, I mean, in terms of the evidence, we've got two schemes that are running that are payment by results schemes, where the government's setting a very clear objective and saying, if you cut reoffending, we'll pay you in full, and if you don't, we won't. And that's the incentive that Policy Exchange and that the government have been talking about. And one of those schemes in Peterborough, the reoffending results of the cohort are 23% lower than the national average. And in Doncaster, reoffending is being cut substantially as well.
About Peterborough, my understanding is that there's about 15 months yet to run of that. They're very, very early results on a very small sample. Can I just put the point that the NAPA representative made in the film, which was, it's increasingly hard to enforce justice. Do you accept that?
No, I don't accept that. I mean, I don't think we saw from the IT issues that all probation trusts were having that there's necessarily an issue around enforcing justice that is exclusive to the private sector. I don't think that the investigation proved that at all. And what we're talking about is not just the running of community payback, but the running of probation supervision in the round. And what the government is saying is that the probation service has not performed well enough in terms of reducing reoffending, and that there's an awful...
Isn't saying that.
Well, the government has said that the reoffending rates have been relatively...
The government is saying that reoffending rates in relation to under 12-month prisoners are too high, whom the probation service do not supervise.
But they're also suggesting that you can do things in a more efficient way, and this contract will save taxpayers £25 million.
If you were to try and extrapolate from the costs of the London Community Payback contract to how much you could save throughout the country, then I think you'd be sadly mistaken. There's no evidence that you can make that level of savings across the country. Our concern is that plans for privatisation, which are ill thought through, are being driven in too quickly, and that puts the public at risk. If you have 70% of the caseload, and you're talking probably 190,000 offenders supervised by the private sector on models that are untried and untested, where there are even teething problems, will put the public at risk.
Okay. Final word.
Well, I think these reforms are not being rushed. They've been in the pipeline since 2007. We're 6 years later now. We can wait another 6 years. But meanwhile, there are tens of thousands of offenders who are not getting proper supervision, thousands of people reoffending all the time, and we need these reforms. They're good reforms, and we hope the government see them through.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Tonight, the Ministry of Justice released a statement. Public safety has not been compromised in the delivery of this contract, which has provided 1 million hours of offender labour for London. Serco's performance has been improving month on month. They're now meeting most key targets and outperforming the national average on most key measures. Latest July figures show 80% of offenders successfully completing their payback, 3% above the national average. And all offenders are thoroughly risk assessed before being placed on a community payback project, and breaches are dealt with robustly. Figures for July show 98% of breach cases were followed through with enforcement action by Serco. They're also offering enough placements to meet the court's demands within London. And it goes on. As with all innovative ways of working, there were some bedding-in issues during the transition stage, and we're dissatisfied these have been resolved. But we're not complacent. We've asked London Probation Trust to inform us of any incidents where they have not received correct paperwork that may have affected breach action. We'll follow up any evidence of this with Serco. Our audit of all contracts the Ministry of Justice holds with both Serco and G4